"Sir, we don't allow panhandling in here." That was the first thing the manager said. No hello, no curiosity, just dismissal. Sharp, rehearsed, and public. The man standing by the door didn't flinch. He simply nodded once like he'd been expecting it. Like it wasn't the first time his presence came with an assumption. He held a weathered green cap in one hand. His coat, military style, frayed at the seams, still dripped from the rain outside. On his feet, boots that had outlived their soles. His face was thin, the skin drawn with age, but his eyes held something steadier than pity. He glanced at the back corner of the restaurant, a small table by the window. "That one used to be ours," he said softly. "My wife liked the way the lights looked through the rain." The manager didn't follow his gaze. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "I'm not here to eat," the man replied. "Just to sit. One last time." "We're a reservation-only establishment," the manager said, more softly now, but not more kindly. "You understand." There was a moment, a flicker in the air, like even the light had paused. Then the old man turned. He didn't argue, he didn't beg. He simply bowed his head and stepped toward the door. But from the back of the room, a chair scraped loudly against hardwood. A man stood, tall, broad-shouldered, clean-cut in a way that suggested precision, not vanity, mid-40s maybe, the kind of posture that didn't come from yoga. He walked toward the entrance, slowly, intentionally. "Sergeant Carter?" he said, voice steady. The old man stopped. "Who's asking?" The younger man reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a photograph, worn at the edges. "My father, Robert Cross, 2nd Ranger Battalion, Loch Ninh, 1970. He never stopped talking about you." The name hit like thunder in a quiet valley. The manager looked up, confused. A couple near the bar paused mid-sentence. The old man took the photo with trembling fingers. He stared. "I carried him out," he whispered. "He kept calling for his son." "He made it," the younger man said. "Because of you. And now, I'm here." The restaurant had fallen completely silent. The manager cleared his throat. "Is everything okay here?" The younger man didn't even look at him. He turned to the old man instead. "I'm Daniel Cross, Navy SEAL. And if it's all right with you, sir, I'd like you to join us for dinner." Have you ever looked away when someone like him walked in? Not because you meant to, just because you didn't know what to do. This story isn't about pity, it's about presence. About what happens when one person decides, "Not this time." Don't just listen. Remember. And if someone ever made room for you, make room for the next. Subscribe to This Really Happened. Because some stories don't shout. They stand quietly, waiting to be seen. They walked together toward the corner table. 3 other men were seated there, all veterans, from different wars, different branches. They didn't stand. They didn't salute. They just made space. The old man, Sergeant Carter, lowered himself into the chair. Slowly, deliberately. He set the green cap on the table. It landed without sound, but the weight of it was deafening. No one spoke at first. Not because there was nothing to say, but because some silences are sacred. The kind that don't need to be filled. The kind that say, "We see you." Sergeant Carter looked around the table. One man had a prosthetic hand. Another wore a Marine tattoo across a scarred forearm. The youngest, mid-30s maybe, sat with his back perfectly straight, eyes wide open but measured. Each of them carried their own weight, but none of them looked away. Daniel finally broke the silence. My father told me you saved him, dragged him through jungle and mortar fire. He said you didn't speak, just kept moving." Carter's hands rested on the table, still gripping the edges of the photo. "I didn't think anyone remembered that mission. Most of us didn't come back." Daniel nodded. "He never forgot. Said the medic who carried him had a cross stitched into his shoulder strap and a brass pin tied to his belt." Carter reached into his coat, slowly, carefully. He unwrapped a cloth pouch, worn thin by time. Inside was a small brass pin, a set of wings with a nearly faded red cross at the center. "My wife gave it to me," he said. "Told me not to wear it like a badge, just to carry it." "So you remember who you are when the noise gets too loud," she said. Daniel stared. "That's it. That's the one." The others leaned forward. No one touched it, but something passed between them, a moment of shared reverence. The waiter approached, but didn't speak. He simply placed a cup of black coffee in front of Carter, as if he already knew what was needed. Carter smiled slightly. "You used to be able to get a cup of this for $1. The youngest veteran chuckled. "Now it's $5 and a lecture on beans." They laughed, gently, easily, not out of mockery, but recognition. Daniel glanced at the empty chair next to Carter. "She used to sit there, didn't she?" Carter looked away for a second, then nodded. "Miriam, we came here every year, her birthday, our anniversary, or just because we could." He touched the edge of the table. "She passed in '09, fast, quiet, like everything else she did. No one offered condolences, they just listened, like men who knew how little words helped when it came to absence." "I stopped coming after that," Carter said. "Until tonight." Daniel asked, "Why tonight?" Carter looked toward the window. The rain outside had stopped, but the light still danced on the glass. "Because I didn't want the memory to die in my head. I wanted to sit where she laughed. One more time." He glanced around the table. "I didn't expect this." Daniel smiled. "None of us did." The man with the prosthetic lifted his glass. "To the ones who carried us, quietly." The rest followed, not loudly, not ceremonially, just enough to feel like something real was being marked. As the glasses touched, Carter looked down at the pin again. "I used to think I carried that for them," he said. "But maybe I carried it for me." Daniel nodded. "And maybe now, it's time someone else helps carry you." Carter didn't reply, but he didn't look away either. The rain returned after dinner. Not in sheets or thunder, just the soft, steady kind. The kind that blurred headlights and reminded you how fragile silence could be. But inside the restaurant, the old corner table had become something else. Something more permanent than wood and cloth. It had become a memory with a heartbeat. The other veterans had left. Quiet handshakes, claps on the shoulder, a shared look that said, "We'll see you again, whether here or somewhere else." Only Daniel and Carter remained, sitting with the last of their coffee. Carter traced the rim of his cup with a fingertip, not nervously, just thoughtfully. "I always wondered if he made it home," he said. "He did," Daniel replied. "He came back and raised a boy who grew up thinking silence was strength." Carter looked at him. "And now? Now I think silence is just waiting for the right listener." Carter nodded. "He was a good man." "He was," Daniel agreed. "But I think he never forgave himself for surviving, for watching others fall and not being able to carry them all." Carter's voice was soft. "That's the curse. You bring one home and bury 20 in your sleep." The waiter approached again, this time holding a small box. "The manager wanted you to have this," he said. Inside the box was a folded card and a brass plaque. The card read, "This table is now permanently reserved on November 12th each year in honor of those who carried us through fire and never asked to be named." The plaque simply said, "Sergeant Elijah Carter, he stayed." Carter exhaled, sharp and silent. "I didn't stay for praise," he said. "I know," Daniel replied. "That's why it matters." Outside, the rain drummed lightly on the window. Carter turned his gaze toward the reflections, red, gold, white, stretching across the wet street like ribbons of time. "I used to sit here and count how many times she laughed during dinner," he said. "Some nights I'd get 5. On our anniversary, I once got 9. Daniel smiled. "She had a good laugh?" "No," Carter said. "She had the kind that didn't need to be good. Just hers." They stood. Carter placed the pin gently back into its pouch. Then, with quiet hands, slid the card into his coat pocket and left the plaque on the table. Daniel gestured toward the door. "Need a ride?" Carter hesitated, then nodded. "If it's not too much trouble." It never was. They walked back through the restaurant, past diners who watched but didn't speak. Some nodded, others lowered their eyes, ashamed they hadn't stood first. But the silence now wasn't cold. It was warm, heavy with meaning. Outside, the city had quieted. Rain on rooftops, cars hushing through puddles, the kind of evening that felt more like a pause than an ending. Daniel opened the car door. Carter climbed in slowly, settling into the seat like it had always been waiting for him. As they pulled away, Carter looked back once at the glowing windows of Langston and Pine. "It's funny," he said. "I walked in tonight to remember someone." "And?" Daniel asked. "And I think I got remembered too." They didn't speak much during the drive. Daniel kept his eyes on the road, his hands steady on the wheel. Carter sat in the passenger seat, watching the city pass through raindrops. Every light seemed a little softer, every street a little more familiar. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of things neither of them needed to explain anymore. When they pulled up outside Daniel's home, the porch light was already on. A small front yard, a flag on a short pole near the steps, wind chimes whispering in the breeze. Nothing fancy, just lived in. Steady. "You sure about this?" Carter asked, his hand still on the door handle. Daniel nodded. "Come inside. Just for a while." Carter stepped out into the rain without rushing. The drops hit his shoulders, rolled off his cap. But he didn't pull it lower. He let the rain do what it wanted. Inside, the house was warm. A soft lamp lit the hallway. Photos lined the wall, Daniel in uniform, his wife and son, and one faded picture of a man Carter recognized. "That's him," he said, stopping. Daniel turned. "Yeah, that's the only photo we have from before the war. He didn't keep many after." Carter stared at it. He had that same look in the jungle, like he knew he wasn't coming back, but was going anyway. They stood there for a moment, shoulder to shoulder. "You hungry?" Daniel asked. Carter shook his head. "Not tonight. Just tired." Daniel gestured toward the guest room. "It's made up. No pressure. Door stays open." Carter hesitated, then stepped inside. The room was simple, bed neatly made, a small nightstand, a folded towel, a note on the pillow. "Stay as long as you need." He didn't unpack. He didn't sit. He just stood there a moment, cap in his hand, eyes scanning the space like he was checking for ghosts. Then he placed the cap gently on the dresser. From down the hall, Daniel's voice came quietly. "You're not alone here, Sergeant. Not anymore. The rain picked up outside. Carter closed the door, not all the way, and sat on the edge of the bed. He ran a hand over the blanket. Clean, soft, grounded. For years, he'd thought he would disappear quietly. No legacy, no echo. But now there was a plaque on a table. A son who remembered. A stranger who stood. A home that wasn't his, but didn't ask him to leave. And for the first time in decades, Sergeant Elijah Carter let himself believe. He hadn't been carried. He hadn't been saved. He'd been seen. The sun rose quietly the next morning, slipping through the curtains and settling softly across the hardwood floor of the guest room. Carter sat at the edge of the bed, boots on, hands resting on his knees. He hadn't really slept, but he hadn't tossed or turned either. Just rested, a kind of rest he hadn't known in years. The kind that came not from comfort, but from relief. Relief that he didn't have to explain himself, that no one was asking what he did, or why he looked the way he did when a helicopter passed overhead, or why he sat with his back to the wall in every restaurant. Down the hall, he heard quiet movement, the clink of dishes, the shuffle of socks on tile, and then a young voice. "Is he awake yet?" Daniel responded, hushed. "Give him a minute." Carter smiled to himself. He rose, straightened the blanket with practiced precision, and stepped out into the hall. At the table sat a boy, maybe 13, with the same jawline as Daniel and a nervous energy in his hands. In front of him, a notepad, a pencil, and a plate of toast he hadn't touched. Carter entered, and the boy stood quickly. "Morning," Carter said. "Hi," the boy replied, voice unsure. "This your son?" Carter asked, glancing at Daniel. Daniel nodded. "Yeah, this is Noah." The boy stepped forward, then paused. "Sir, can I ask you something?" Carter tilted his head. "You just did." Noah grinned, despite himself. Can I interview you? For my school project?" Carter raised an eyebrow. "What kind of project?" "Veterans Day. We're supposed to write about someone who served. Most kids are doing a grandparent, or someone they looked up online. But my dad said you were real." Carter glanced at Daniel. Daniel shrugged. "I might have said something like that." Carter looked back at Noah. "You want to hear war stories?" Noah shook his head. "No, sir. I want to hear your story." That gave Carter pause. He sat. Noah opened his notebook. "Okay, name? Elijah Carter. Branch? Army, combat medic. Conflict? Vietnam." Noah scribbled quickly, tongue between his teeth. "Did you get hurt?" "Not where it showed." The pencil stopped. "Did you ever think you wouldn't make it?" "Almost every day." "Did you ever save someone?" Carter looked up, straight into the boy's eyes. "I tried." Noah nodded slowly, then turned the page. "What do you want people to remember about you?" That question landed harder than the others. Carter took a breath. "That I showed up, even when I didn't know if it would matter." Noah wrote that down, carefully, word for word. Daniel stood at the sink, listening. He didn't interrupt, just let the moment build on its own. When the interview ended, Carter looked at the boy. "You know," he said, "you remind me of someone I knew a long time ago." "Was he a soldier?" "No," Carter said. "He was a kid, about your age, carried hope around like it was armor." Noah smiled. Carter stood. "You ever need another interview, you know where to find me." The boy nodded, and as Carter turned to pour himself a cup of coffee, he realized, This was legacy. Not in statues, not in ceremonies, but in a kitchen, with a kid and a notebook, and a father who listened. Later that day, Carter sat on the porch again. Same chair, same cup of coffee, same quiet. But something in him had changed. Not visibly, not obviously, but deeply. His shoulders didn't fold inward anymore. His hands didn't fidget. And for once, his eyes didn't scan the horizon like it might betray him. He was simply present. Daniel joined him, handing over a folded newspaper. "They ran a piece this morning," he said. Carter opened it carefully. Front page, lower corner, a photo of the plaque at Langston and Pine. The headline read, "Reserved for the ones who stayed." Beneath it, a short write-up about the quiet tribute. No quotes, no interviews, just acknowledgement. And in the final line, 5 simple words. He came back. He stayed. Carter closed the paper and handed it back. "Neatly done," he said. Daniel smirked. "Tried not to make a scene." "You didn't," Carter replied. "You just made space." They sat a while longer, the wind picking up gently, rattling the chimes above their heads. Leaves skipped down the sidewalk like they were racing time. "You know," Daniel said eventually, "I always wondered why my father never tried to find you." Carter nodded slowly. "Some wounds don't want to be reopened, even for the right reasons. I think he was afraid." "Of what?" "That maybe you hadn't made it. That if he found out you didn't, he'd lose the version of you that saved him." Carter considered that. "I get it. I spent years not looking anyone up. Told myself it was about privacy, dignity. But really, I just didn't want to know how many didn't make it." Daniel looked out at the street. "We lose people twice. First when they fall, then again when we stop saying their names." "That's why I came back," Carter said. "To say hers again. To sit where she laughed. To remember out loud." He tapped the side of his mug. "I didn't know I'd end up being remembered too." Daniel's wife stepped onto the porch then, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. "Dinner's ready," she said with a smile. "You're both coming in this time." They followed her inside. The table was set for 5, a subtle shift. A chair pulled up for Carter, a napkin folded neatly on the plate. A place that hadn't been his, but had been made his. During the meal, they didn't talk about war. They talked about food, about music, about the way Robert always burnt toast no matter how hard he tried. About things that made Carter laugh in a way that sounded unfamiliar, even to him. After dinner, Robert brought out a shoebox. "This is for you," he said. Carter opened it. Inside were pages, the printed story Robert had written for school, photos they had found online, a printed scan of the restaurant's plaque, and on top, a small card. "Thank you for making room for us to remember." Carter swallowed, looked at the boy. "You didn't have to do all this." "I know," Robert said. "But you did." Carter closed the box, hands firm, voice soft. "Then maybe I did something right after all." That night, he didn't leave the porch light on. He didn't fold his coat by the door. He didn't wonder if this would all vanish in the morning. He just slept. Without guard. Without fear. Without forgetting. But finally, without carrying it alone. The next morning, Franklin Carter walked to the mailbox. It was a simple act, the kind millions do each day without thinking. But for him, it felt symbolic, like claiming a space in the rhythm of the world he thought had left him behind. Inside the box, among circulars and bills, was a small white envelope, no return address, just his name, handwritten, steady, and clean. He opened it on the porch. Inside was a note. "You probably don't remember me, but I remember you, Loch Nin, 1970. I was the one you lifted when you could have run. My grandson saw the article, showed me the plaque. I just wanted you to know, you were the reason I made it to see him born. You were the reason I stayed. No signature. Carter folded the letter once, then again, and slid it into his chest pocket, next to the pin. He didn't need to know the name. He already knew the feeling. Later that week, Daniel came home with a surprise. He held up a tablet, screen glowing. "They want to interview you," he said. "A podcast, Veterans Legacy Series." Carter smirked. "That sounds like a lot." "You don't have to say yes," Daniel offered, "but I think your voice could help more people than you realize." Carter didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped outside, tablet still in hand, sat in his chair, watched the street, and thought about all the voices that never got to speak. The stories trapped in drafty apartments, in lonely shelters, in boxes that no one bothered to open. He clicked the screen. A voice greeted him. "Mr. Carter, we'd be honored to hear your story." And for the first time in his life, Franklin Carter said, "Yeah, I think I'm ready." The recording happened a week later. No lights, no cameras, just a quiet room, a microphone, and a man willing to finally say it out loud. He didn't embellish. He didn't dramatize. He spoke about mud, about carrying someone who didn't make it, about wishing for letters that never came, about a bench outside a restaurant, and the moment someone said his name when the world was ready to forget it. He ended the recording with one sentence. "If you're out there wondering if you still matter, you do. I promise you do." The episode aired on a Thursday. Within 24 hours, Daniel's phone was flooded. Messages, emails, strangers writing in from Montana, Florida, even Seoul. One said, "My grandfather never talked about the war, but after listening to Franklin, he cried. Then he spoke." Another wrote, "I walked past a homeless vet today. I didn't look away. I stopped. Because of that story." And then, a school principal reached out. They wanted to invite Mr. Carter to speak. Not about tactics, not about medals, but about staying. Daniel showed him the message. Carter read it once, twice, then smiled. "All right," he said. "Let's go meet the next generation." The auditorium wasn't grand. Folding chairs, a flickering projector. But the room was full of kids, parents, teachers, people who hadn't seen a veteran in real life before. When Carter stepped onto the stage, no one clapped. Not because they didn't care, but because they weren't sure if applause was enough. He looked out at the crowd, then down at Robert, seated in the front row. He cleared his throat. "I used to think silence kept us safe, that if we didn't speak it, it couldn't hurt us again." He paused. "But I was wrong. Silence doesn't protect. It buries." He took a breath. "My name is Franklin Carter. I was a combat medic. I carried people who never got carried home, and for a long time I thought I didn't matter." He looked up. "But I was wrong about that too." The crowd didn't erupt. There was no standing ovation, just stillness, the kind that doesn't need sound to show its weight. Carter stepped back from the microphone, hands trembling slightly, though not from nerves. It was something else, the unfamiliar weight of being heard. When he stepped off stage, a teacher met him near the steps. She looked like she wanted to say something profound, but all she managed was, "Thank you." Carter nodded. "Thank you for listening." Outside the school, the wind had picked up. Daniel walked beside him, silent for a moment. Then, "You did good." Carter smirked. "Not bad for an old ghost, huh?" Daniel laughed. "You're not a ghost, Frank. You just needed someone to turn on the light." That weekend, Carter visited Langston and Pine one more time. He went alone this time. No escort, no fanfare, just him. The manager recognized him the moment he walked through the door and gestured silently toward the back table. It was empty, not by accident. The plaque still rested there, polished. A small vase sat at the center of the table with fresh white lilies. Carter didn't sit. He just stood for a long time, fingers grazing the chair she used to sit in. And then softly, "Hey, Mir." He didn't speak loud. Didn't need to. "I came back." He smiled faintly. "I thought you'd want to know." He placed a single folded paper on the table, Robert's school essay. Then he turned and walked out. Not because he was finished, but because he no longer needed to stay. In the months that followed, Carter stayed with Daniel's family. He spoke at schools, visited VA centers, not as a hero, just as a man who had lived long enough to tell the truth. He helped Robert build a model airplane one weekend. The boy asked if it looked like the ones from the war. "Not even close," Carter laughed. "But it flies. That's what matters." One morning, Daniel walked into the kitchen and found Carter at the table, sipping coffee, a pen in hand. "Writing something?" Carter nodded. "A letter." "To who?" Carter looked up. "Anyone who needs it." He passed the paper across the table. It read, "To whoever finds this, you're not too late. You're not forgotten. You still belong somewhere. Find someone who listens, and stay." Franklin Carter passed away quietly 6 weeks later in his sleep. The family held a small service. No guns, no speeches, just stories. At the back of the room, on a small table near the guest book, sat his cap, and beside it, a note in Robert's handwriting. He didn't just serve, he stayed. Langston and Pine still keeps that table reserved every November. But something changed after Carter left. Now the table stays reserved year-round. Not for someone famous, not for someone wealthy, just for someone who thought no one would remember, until they did. So if you ever walk into a place and see an empty table with a plaque, don't sit. Just pause, and know that someone sat there once, carrying more than silence. And because of that, you didn't have to.